Fine, I think I'm audible now. So let me repeat what we have said, right? So we are talking about the crash course and the test fees program today for mains 2023 public administration, but this discussion is not primarily for the timetable or for the course promotion. It is mainly for all the students who are writing mains, all the people who have to improve upon their scores in public administration, all those who want to improve their ranks in public administration, how they can actually approach this paper depending upon the kind of themes which are coming recurrently in this paper. So this paper, if you see 2022, it has two parts like paper 1 and paper 2 that you know. Now when you think of paper 1 part A, most of you'll find the questions, they are designed around certain topics where we can mostly predict the themes. Part B obviously has more non-conformist, non-stereotype of paper or questions which get influenced from the current developments as well, and at the same time they are somewhere interlinked with paper 2. So in paper 1 and paper 2 both, we can identify some recurrent topics, what we call as trends. These themes are most likely to appear in the exam always, though with varying degrees of understanding. Like for example, your paper 1, if I take. So one very important theme that most of the times is visible, right, is the meaning, scope and significance, nature of public administration, which is very dominantly asked, even though I would say that it is not asked directly. For example, L.D. White's statement that the study of public administration must start with the base of management rather than foundation of law. Now this question is not just about dichotomy, or it is not coming from the idea of management versus administration, but it basically talks about the nature of public administration. So there are a lot of statements by various scholars when they are defining public administration, they end up in basically in some of these brackets, in some of these topics, meaning, scope, definition, significance, nature of public administration, right. So this question basically is coming from that idea. Public management takes what and why from public administration and how from business management. Obviously it is making a reference to that idea where management dominated the study of administrative theories, or the beginning of the phase of industrialization, where organizations were considered to be the primary means of increasing productivity and efficiency, and administration was the activity which was responsible for it. So they did not distinguish between basically public and private management. So that is the idea of the question, for example, this one. So that is one area which you need to watch out for, right. Then for example, let's see this question 2 again. This should have been asked in basically 15 marks or 20 marks, but they've asked in 10 marks. That also shows a trend in the UPSC that they are moving towards asking these smaller questions in higher marks and the higher or bigger questions in the smaller marks. So that also is somewhere like creating a problem with respect to the content which is available with the students to write. So Likud's system 4 or system 1 to system 4, right, that is the question actually that you can write. You know, system 1 starts with an exploitative authoritative model, and system 4 ends up in participative or consultative model, basically participative model. So that is easy questions, right. Then you have themes like obviously tribunals, administrative law, that is also very important theme, right? So public management, nature of public administration, its changing dynamics is one recurrent topic which is generally asked. So we have to identify first the major themes around which the paper 1 or part A of the paper 1 is designed, and then part B of the paper 1 is designed, and likewise for paper 2. So we have tried to identify those themes. That is what we have tried to do in the crash course program, because in a small span of time we have to develop an understanding of the topics, we have to revise the major areas and the themes, and at the same time we also have to somewhere put that into the exact or the required expression needed to write the answer. Right? Obviously, it has to be supplemented or complemented with the test series, because whatever we study, whatever we do, whatever frameworks we develop, that needs to be duly written down into a form of answer which could be understandable. Practical and theoretical aspects both have to be integrated, and that is why the need for writing the tests. Okay, so we have like this is also a very recurrent theme, especially when you see classical organization theory, right? Now classical organization theory, in one form or the other form it is asked, right? Whether you talk about Taylor's scientific management, like the question which had come last year, the principles of analysis and principle of action, that was primarily about execution and planning, fine, or the management by exception, that was used by Taylor. So in some or the other form, this area or this theme of classical organization is asked, right? Most of the times you will find Weber's bureaucracy and the post-bureaucratic developments, okay, they are also asked on the theme of or with respect to the classical model of organization. So classical organization is again very important theme which has to be focused, but how and in what aspect it has to be studied, that is important. Then civil society, this question obviously is more related to, I would say, the general studies, and how it overlaps very easily from general studies to the public administration. But here the nature of the answer should not be very general study type, or it should not be generalized. So obviously you have to talk about theoretically the idea of civil society. Even though it is 10 mark, we can use with the definition of civil society, and then we can talk about that, okay, how or what are the bases of civil society, especially in a developing society like India. So the basis of civil society aggregation or association of people as a civil society, so the primary factors which bind them together, right, they basically arise from the political elites or economic elites, or for that matter people who are dominantly idealized in the society. So whether you talk about Me Too movement, which could not become into that kind of movement, right, or anti-corruption movement like Lokpal, or for that matter when you talk about the CSAT movement, UPSC reforms movement, and likewise. So definitely there are various type of movements where civil societies, groupings and associations have become vital for the policy formulation and influencing the policy, but majority of them have been captured by the elites, or they have been dominated by the elites. That is one bigger drawback. Plus the fragmented nature of the society, the fractured nature of the diversity that exists in the society, that primarily does not allow the association or formation of a credible civil society, and that is what the question was talking about. Fine. So even if we look at, right, okay, fine, all tribunals, okay, fine. So this is also one aspect. Now let us see the second question. This is also one recurrent theme that we have identified, right, especially leadership. So leadership, as you know, is also an important area where we talk about organizational behavior and organizational development, right. There are two important aspects, organizational behavior and development. So here also leadership is quite frequent in the UPSC exam, and there are certain dimensions of leadership that we can capture obviously in our classes or when we are revising or doing the crash course type program. So leadership has multiple dimensions, and who is a leader? A leader versus manager, a transformative leadership, transactional leadership, right? Normative leadership, coercive leadership. So Nicholas Henry's book obviously has, and Stephen Robbins also to an extent, they have described, they have understood or highlighted the various bases, various factors of leadership. These bases or factors of leadership definitely helps us in understanding that what are the reasons for the emergence of a leader in the organization, and to what extent these leadership abilities could be used to influence the functions, the efficiency, the emotional, the psychological aspects of the workers. So that aspect has to be studied. Types of leadership, right? The impact of leadership today, or if we want, we can definitely look into the dimensions like the collector as a leader, or for that matter, the political leadership to improve the administrative functioning, right? Good governance requiring leadership rather than managership. So we can obviously venture into those themes, and we have already identified those themes for the classes, right? That is what we have tried to do. So human relations again is one area which is quite dominantly asked, especially Mayo, informal organization, the cafeteria concept of informal organizations. So these are also certain various topics which are more or less frequently asked in the exam. So we have to look out for these topics, right? Bernard, definitely Bernard and Simon, two important behavioral scholars who had immense contribution to decision making, leadership, zone of indifference, zone of acceptance, then formal, informal organizations. So Bernard and Simon definitely are the important scholars to look out for, especially when you talk about paper 1, and especially even in your part A as well as part B. In both the cases you see overlapping, right? When it talks about decision making, techniques of administrative reforms, and likewise. So they get interrelated many places. So you need to look out for this. Then the question like, yes, NPS, this is something new, or you can say this is something which has been asked, but this perspective that has been asked is something new. So we also have to look for these type of developments which can be called as post-bureaucratic, more humanist perspective, pro-democratic areas or issues which have emerged in public administration, especially after the emergence of globalization. So NPS or Neo-Weberian state, NWS, that was also one area which was highlighted last year. So new public management, these are like post-NPM developments, post-Weberian models. So new public service or Neo-Weberian state, or NPG, new public governance, or for that matter you can say the whole of government approach, WGA, right? And postmodernist perspective, public policy, postmodernism in leadership and motivation, right? Postmodernist concept of authority, governmentality, right? That is one area which is again can be understood here. So we must look out for such unique developments also, right? So that now see this question, we'll just simplify this question, we'll try to take up this question, strategic communication, right? Now this question, many of the students have obviously come up with the idea that okay, this was not there, no, it's not true, right? When we study communication, we talk about cybernetics, right, or situational and contingency approaches. Now, communication is one aspect when you think of a combination of formal and informal communication. Right? These are two very important aspects of running an organization in the most acceptable manner. So, formal and informal communication models, they integrate what we can say a balanced mode of managing an organization. But 1960s saw, like you said, like we all know, the emergence of the dominantly informal aspect, the growth of human relations theory, behavior, the what you can say, the emotional, psychological, social factors affecting the organization more than the economic and production. So, this aspect is basically asked on those lines. So, when we think of communication in 1960s onwards and communication becoming one of the important means of driving the leadership, communication becoming one of the important means of balancing the organizational change with the environment outside. So, we use a model called cybernetic governance, right? Probably I don't remember, but we gave this question somewhere 5 years back. So, at least I am thankful to UPSC that it has asked now, right, but probably it was ahead of time, but still we gave this one question that National E-Governance Program 2.0 focuses on a cybernetic model of governance, right. That model is basically the model of strategic communication. So, every organization, question says strategic communication ought to be an agile management process. Discuss the conceptualization of strategic communication for the government action. See, so basically your cybernetic model of governance now, because government organizations are bureaucratic and they have all the drawbacks of a hierarchical model of organization. And this is where you can say the role of technology or technology enabled communication systems comes into picture. So, government within the system and government and citizen interaction, they are both restricted by the lack of flexibility, the lack of free flow of communication within the government system or bureaucracy. When you think of the political leadership and the secretary or the administrator, there also the manner of communication is quite restricted. So, the strategic decisions which are taken at the top, they take a lot of time to be conveyed to the lower levels or to the middle and lower levels, right. Hierarchy, red tapeism, a lot of roadblocks are there, filing procedures, documentation, multiple filing, multiple reviews, there are a lot of drawbacks are there, right. Plus, it is quite obvious that having tall hierarchies, the government system is not flexible enough to convey the decisions on time. In fact, it takes a lot of time for the decisions to reach, and by the time the decisions are taken, the value of that particular decision is lost. So, strategic communication is not something new concept. It is very well integrated in the concept of cybernetic model of governance or cybernetics as an area of study, right, and that is why this question was asked. So, what are the aspects of strategic communication, right? So, people should have talked about how we can develop a more flexible, more interactive and more what you can say flexible communication systems, so that we can make decisions much faster, we can take better feedback from the people, and obviously every organization needs to have a strategic communication model, right. Obviously, it again requires that government should restructure or reform many of its existing structures, right. For example, you have Karmyogi mission, right. So, Karmyogi is basically focusing on the training, right. So, the training is based on the world's best practices. It is based on what? It is based on how well you are able to understand the information that is shared across the organization, right. So, that leadership, like I said, again has been asked So you see twice the idea of leadership seems to be visible in the paper, and it obviously shows a more progressive paper by the UPSC, a more contemporary theme based ideas rather than going for the traditional theories and traditional organizational principles which it was quite obsessed with probably 4 or 5 years back. So it's changing its entire nature. It's becoming more, I would say, creative and more analytical, more welcoming to new ideas, right? Regulatory governance, see, that is also an important area where you see we talk about RBI today, let's say that's a very important area. Competition Commission of India recently, the issue with Google, right? The pay models which the Google want all its listed apps to use. So Madras High Court gave a judgment in favor of Shadi.com. So you can, if you are reviewing the news today, it is quite easy that we identify a lot of common themes, right? If you remember already, they had asked about net neutrality, right? So regulatory frameworks or regulatory bodies, especially this is in the essence of public-private partnership, right? Or it is in the essence of market-based governance. So somewhere regulatory framework or regulatory body is a concurrent theme again in UPSC that we have to look for. Social auditing again, like civil society and social audit, again are more GS centric ideas, but they again have to be dealt in a more public centric or public administration method. So social audit has good governance, globalization and the consequence of globalization and the need for social audit, decentralization of power and the need for social audit, right? So these themes again become quite important. Fine. So let's take you see DA again. So CPA and DA are again recurring themes, even though like development administration, they have not directly asked this theoretical aspect since like last 2-3 years, but they have obviously implied on development administration most of the times, whether it is related to women development, models of women development, women and development administration, inclusive development or financial inclusion. So many of these programs like Atmanirbhar, if you talk about, right, or if you talk about vocal for local. So there are various ways or approaches by which we can definitely think of the changing perspectives of development administration, right? The increasing role of the panchayats and the gram panchayats in development administration, reducing the role of DRDA, district rural development agencies. Okay, so that aspect should also be understood, and the emergence of various new institutional agencies which are there. Gift City, it has two types of questions which are generally asked. One is the theory or theoretical model of public policy, other is the application of public policy. So see, this is more of application. Policy evaluation contributes fundamentally to sound public governance, right? So obviously this is focusing more on feedback. In these questions, the important aspect is how to write, right? So that is exactly where we need to discuss the things, we need to develop pointers, we need to find out exact data and facts regarding them, and probably then we can write good answers. So understanding this question is not tough, but putting that question into 100-150 words, that is the toughest part. So right, so here we try to cater to this through the crash course that we have. We'll try to build upon various themes that we have identified, themes and their dimensions. Like we have talked about various themes which are very common in paper 1, right? CPA, again this question was you can say one of the very useful areas to study when we talk about comparative public administration. So all the traditional models of CPA which were trying to break away from the dominance of the American public administration, all these traditional models of CPA initially focused on bench or using Weber's bureaucratic theory as the benchmark, right? So using Weber's bureaucratic theory as a benchmark provided certain benefits. Obviously, to understand that how far there is deviation in these developing countries from the standard bureaucratic model. So this question again is in similar context. Weber's construct of bureaucracy has served. Now see furthering research in the field of CPA. Yes, it was the inefficiency of the Weber's model, it was the failure of the Weber's model, or it was the what you can say lack of implementation using the Weber's model in many developing countries that provided the scope for emergence of new alternative models, or at least exploring new models. If you see, one thing is very common in paper 1, that either you will have questions regarding bureaucratic theory, or you will have at least one post bureaucratic model will be asked, right, or you may be asked the criticism of the Weber's model. This is a very recurrent theme, so that must be focused by the students. You will be able to at least score 20 plus 15, that is 35 marks if you just focus on Weber, post bureaucratic models and criticism of Weber. Fine. Now see, standards are the foundation which do not replace regulations but complement them. Obviously, the importance of rules, regulations, or I would say code of conduct is also an important aspect to enforce the code of ethics. Or your ethical behavior is not subject to your will or some moral teachings only, or the emergence of certain codes. So your ethical behavior is a consequence of internal and external factors both. You will not want to be or you may not necessarily act good because you are a good person, but because there are mechanisms that somewhere make you accountable to become good. So the idea is, this question is a very good question because it is very general in nature. It has a lot of overlap with ethics in governance, probity in governance, or you can say talk about good governance as an idea when applied to the real administration. So this or these kind of questions are also very important to be understood. In fact, now the trend is that lot of analytical statements are asked, and these statements are so general that we actually miss out on the actual understanding of the public administration. So how we are going to balance the theoretical knowledge that we have with certain practical aspects which we will write, and only then probably paper 1 can be tackled in that manner, right. So public administration and ethics, right, ethics, outcome budgeting, again second ARC's statement is there. So you can never actually ignore second ARC when you talk about public administration, right. You might say that okay fine, we don't have to read second ARC completely, yes, that's okay, but as far as possible the various themes which are there in second ARC, you cannot ignore them, right. In fact, like direct lines have been used always, and it is there since and the last 7-8 years, more than that. They are constantly using direct lines from the second ARC. Though I would say second ARC is not a textbook. So even if they are using the lines, they do not probably assume that you are going to write exactly what second ARC has said. The only thing is that if you are aware of why or what was the nature of reform which was recommended by second ARC, and in that nature of reform, if you know that okay what suggestions can be given which will be more practical, then probably knowing that this particular theme comes from this particular report of the second ARC, that will help, right. Otherwise, you can obviously write it in a very general manner. Only drawback would be that if you write in a very general manner, you might lose some precious 1 or 2 marks. So that will obviously lower your overall score. Sixth question again is, you know, it's about rigs. The more exogenetic the process of diffraction, the more formalistic and heterogeneous its prismatic phase. The more endogenic, the less formalistic and heterogeneous. Examine this hypothesis of rigs. Obviously, you have to examine it. You cannot totally write theory. So Riggs' concept of development. exo and endo development, or Rick's concept of differentiation and integration, mole integration. Oh, those aspects you must know, right? Bilinear path prismatic model, many of you might be knowing about it. So that would help you in writing this answer. Plus, when you give and when you talk about examples, that can give an, obviously you know tribal development in India, the integration of the Northeast or inclusive development of the Northeast with respect to the rest of the country. Okay, recently your issues which happened in Northeast, the conflict which was going on, ethnic communities, in fact two ethnic communities, right? One was majority and other was minority, though belonging to the similar territories. So these kind of conflicts and lack of what you can say equitable development across the nation is one of the simpler examples which we can use to make this question more, you can say, understandable, because somewhere the nature of development is directly proportional, or the degree of development is directly proportional to the acceptance of the people by that developmental model, right. So it is seen in many places in India, no doubt, across the globe, not just in India. Otherwise you won't be having the anti-capitalist movements, you won't be having World Social Forum, you won't be having a lot of NGOs, civil society movement across the globe who are criticizing the World Economic Forum, and likewise. Lindblom's model, like I said, so policy is one area which is very important. Washington consensus, this question is about good governance, and in fact the good governance in contemporary times, post Washington phase. Even though this term was used in two perspectives, two dimensions, right, but generally it is taken to the neoliberal reforms, as you know. Sound budgeting system, again this is a usual question. Performance problems are rarely, this is also a very general question, but yes, it's quite important because it is in with respect to personal administration, administrative reforms. Performance problems are rarely caused simply by lack of training, and rarely can performance be improved by training alone. Critically analyze this. Obviously, the performance appraisal systems, like when you have an internal system which was like you have the performance appraisal system or APR system now, right, but when you had annual confidential report ACR system, the evaluation was primarily internal in nature. This evaluation neglected the creativity, the passion, the motivation, the dedication of the people towards the work, and it was mainly focusing on the achievement of some quantitative targets. Also it was quite subjective in nature. So how we have moved from that to APAR system, to performance management system, PMS system, or 180-degree, 360-degree recommendation given by the second ARC, or RFD, results framework development model, right. So obviously a lot of aspects are required, right. Job enrichment is required, theoretically we can talk about that idea. Qualitative addition to the work is required. Your theory why is more useful, because you need to create that environment, the ecosystem in which people can utilize their full potential. So just training may not be enough, right, or imparting skill may not be enough. In fact, training model itself has to undergo transformation, like National Training Policy 2012, Karmyogi, which we are talking about now. We could all use that and write this answer effectively. So you see, somewhere there is always a correlation visible with respect to the facts and the contemporary developments that are taking place in Indian administration and the kind of questions which are asked here. So the questions are very generic, very generalized or analytical. Obviously we cannot write theories in them, right, unless the question is specifically focused on a particular theory, right. So this is more or less fine the question, you can say. So you have let's say paper 2, see. So paper 2 also, you have a lot of themes, right? We have already identified certain themes. Uh, like federalism has been a very dominant theme. Most of the times you'll find federalism, evolution of Indian administration, role of collector. A lot of questions have always been asked on the role of collector in disaster management. Now see, you have seen the disaster of the train accident, Odisha, right, and the failure of the signaling system or Kavach, in spite of the fact that the CAG which audited the railway or which had audited the government expenditure since 2017, it has found out that around 1 lakh crore money has been spent on improving the railway safety systems. So how come something like this happens? Now see, obviously it raises a lot of questions regarding accountability, right, corruption, ethics in governance, administrative reforms. So see, one question is not related only to one topic. Okay, that is what the beauty of public administration as an optional is. And obviously for some people it might be a hindrance also, right? So they might be thinking of why not straightforward question is coming. So it is quite easy to fit a question into any topic, right? But the reality is that most of the questions will be asked keeping multiple units in mind, right? And when I say multiple units, you must realize that when you actually write the answer in the exam, it is more important to think of themes rather than thinking just of topics. Themes help you integrate a lot of topics together, right? Chief Secretary, see, so Government of India Act, one question more or less is always logically coming from here, right? Then Chief Secretary, Cabinet Secretary. Now see, I was talking about federalism. So see, one question always in some form. Even if you talk about Finance Commission related question, Niti Aayog related question, or questions related to the union state relation with respect to centrally sponsored schemes, with respect to various programs and developmental activities going on, internal security issue, law and order issue, police reforms, central police organization. You see, federalism as a theme can be broken into diverse topics, you understand, or diverse subtopics. So that we must identify a very important area to be studied, right? Then see, new economic reforms, coming to 2C, Atmanirbhar Bharat is a progressive policy. See, it is very obvious that in many of the questions in paper 2 you will find the contemporary policies of the government that are always reflected, right? So today also you can refer to more to the focus on how they are focusing on blue economy and responsible artificial intelligence, AI, new data policy and data localization. Then recently, if you know, the breach in the CoWIN data. So CoWIN database was compromised by a Telegram bot. But there are a lot of issues in which you can look into, which will give you contemporary themes to be used in the exam. And in fact, many of the questions might be based on those themes. Fine. So disaster management, data protection, data policy, right, and likewise. So such questions like Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, right, or progressive policies, or one nation, one product, one market, right? These kind of schemes are very important, especially for public administration, because they somewhere impact or they are related to how or what the nature of administrative functions or how the nature of administrative functions are changing, how government's orientation of welfare, development, inclusion, rural development or justice that is transforming, right. So Amartya Sen's model of capabilities is more or less applicable here also. Niti Aayog, very obvious questions on Niti Aayog, indicative planning, demise of planning commission, impact of Niti Aayog, reports of Niti Aayog on rural development. So these kind of themes like, So if you say planning is one theme, then the role of Niti Aayog, demise of Planning Commission, Niti Aayog on rural development, or the status report by Niti Aayog. So one topic in the theme of planning can be indicative planning, right, and its various aspects, Niti Aayog and its various aspects, right, and rural development and planning. So likewise, we have tried to categorize various themes in both the papers. Urban local bodies, obviously Niti Aayog had a specific report on this, how since the impact of the JNNURM, Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, right, and then Urban program, Pura to Urban, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Rural Urban Mission, right. So how these transformations have taken place, what role of urban local bodies, especially when you think of Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, right, and many other urban agglomerations which are emerging today. So how the local bodies have worked and what kind of models of local developments are emerging, right, what global models are existing. So Niti Aayog has talked about many things, right, we can very easily use them in these answers, right. So that is what we need. If we have identified the themes and we have understood the various dimensions that can be asked in that theme, then we need to just have a ready-made content. So crash course is basically going to do that for you, right. We are not getting into a lot of discussion, but definitely we are going to develop certain developed templates which could be used for the answer writing, right. So this has been a perpetual problem, the financial suitability of the urban local bodies. Right, so now you can see again these questions are more or less recurrent. Finance Commission recommendation, Karmyogi, that was quite expected, right. Parliamentary control, this is a very repeated question. Many years when you see and go and see the question paper, old question papers, you will find that this is a very normal theme, mostly asked. Right. See, in India, this is a very good question actually. In India, for the upliftment of majority of people, governmental intervention remains a central factor of life. Nevertheless, the effective implementation of policies depends on the ethical values of public servants. Right. So obviously, the central role of the government, the monopoly over welfare activities, makes the role of the administration primary. So still today also, when you think of welfare, when you think of justice, when you think of rural infrastructure, social development, you take state as the primary actor even today in the context of India. When you see majority of people who are, or I would not say there's a huge majority, but still there is a big majority which is illiterate, uneducated, which does not have, as per census 2011, who do not have access to basic amenities and facilities. Disparity in terms of status, economic status is increasing. The middle class, technically the lower middle class is expanding. TIS report, right? Asian Center for Development Studies, lot of reports are there, they will help you understand, right? UN Habitat report. So the middle class, lower middle class is expanding. Due to GST, due to digitization, lot of communities or lot of groups are coming into the tax net, indirect obviously. So logically what can happen is that the growth and the development of the nation to a large extent depends upon government's interventions. Whether you talk about digitization, tax reforms, social infrastructure, or you can say urban amenities, civic amenities, housing, right, land acquisition, there are a lot of aspects which, in spite of the increasing role of the private sector, the government's role has not diminished, right. Now, so see, but still, even if the government's role is primary, what is the biggest challenge to the government in terms of development? The system which it is using. So it is saying that yes, even if the political will is there, even if the programs are necessary, even if schemes are to be implemented and inclusion is the primary purpose, then also this role will be played by whom? The administration. And if administrative reforms do not take place, if sensitization do not take place, and administrators merely act as the implementers of authority, right, not implementers of change or development. So even if that remains, the entire purpose of the development or development administration, or you can say inclusion of people, will remain a dream and not a reality. So the idea of the question is that, right, so you have to understand it from that perspective. CAG again is one area which is generally asked, like I would not say always, but yes, accountability and control paper 1, financial administration and management both paper 1 and 2, right, and administrative reforms today, contemporary issues. Since all these 4 or 5 topics, the role of auditing and budgeting, or the topic of auditing and budgeting, is very important. So that also we have to think of. New localism is again an important theme which is always asked, right? New localism, how it is interfering with the Panchayati Raj institution, new localism versus PRIs or development of PRIs. When you think of urban areas, the urban areas are moving more towards centralization. The urban management or urban development and the growth of local institutions in urban areas, even though it is fragmented, but it is moving somewhere towards centralization, because the union government's role is very important. The urban development is such a specialized area that you require a lot of experts, lot of institutions. Who can manage all these institutions? Basically, the governments can do it more easily. So even though there are a lot of distinct institutions, like in Delhi we talk about, right, municipal corporation, then New Delhi Municipal Corporation, then Delhi Jal Board, DDA, union government, state government, and various other parastatal bodies. Likewise, most of the urban areas are fragmented in terms of, right, but why they are centralizing? The idea is that they are getting, or they are primarily depending upon the state governments or the union governments for funding patterns, right? Whether you talk about municipal bonds or you talk about municipal borrowings, right? In spite of that, yes, that is one innovative way for them to earn money, but still for basic infrastructure, for regulation, for law and order, for many things, they are dependent upon the higher governments. So you have to understand this new localism and PRIs in that aspect. That is also a very important area which we need to understand. PESA 1996, we have to, this is more like you can say GS type question, the governance question that comes generally in paper 2. It could be written very easily because a lot of content is there, schedule 5, schedule 6, PESA, right, the rights of tribals or the emergence of community rights, the implementation of the Forest Rights Act. So all when bundled together helps you understand this topic. This topic obviously requires more general studies orientation or this question. So GS centric approach plus current themes, current topics and issues are also equally important. That will be integrated into the program. Lokpal in accountability is a usual question. Police reform is a usual question. So when we zero down to whatever we have discussed, there are a lot of recurrent themes which are found in the question paper. The question paper is not that tough, it's not that anarchic as you think, because you have not probably put in the due diligence, due effort to identify what are the major themes in the paper and how these themes can be broken into specific topics. So that we have tried to do for you already. So your crash course program obviously starting 27th of June for all those who are writing mains, and your mains test series, right? They both are like complementary to each other. But anyone who is wishing obviously to improve their score, they have doubts regarding various concepts, if they have not been able to understand theoretical part of paper 1, or how the theory and the practical aspects, the contemporary developments in governance, politics and governance, socio-economic sphere, how they will be used for paper 1, how paper 1 and paper 2 can be interrelated, what are those common joints, what are those convergence points of paper 1 and paper 2. So if you understand, or if you want to understand all this, plus obviously if there is a template for a good answer, or there is a standardized model of writing a good answer, that is also very important aspect. So scoring obviously does not depend upon knowing, but making the examiner know what you know, that is more important, right? So that is one area where we are looking forward to help you all. So all those people who are interested, or who need to have a prior consultation before they want to go for these programs, or people who want to in general discuss about their issues, problems related to public administration, understanding and writing, who have continuously failed to get more marks, right? Kindly communicate with us. We are willing, more than willing in fact, to help you, right? Plus whatever benefit we can give you in terms of these customized, curated, already predetermined, pre-mediated type of programs, which can understand the realities of the forthcoming paper, which can predict to an extent, okay, what exactly would be the dominant themes which will be asked in the examination, right? So kindly talk to us, meet us, call us, right, or interact with us. The programs will be starting on 27 June for crash course, and 1st July for test papers or mains test series. Little time has been given to you, right, so that you can read certain things, and during this phase, even during the writing of tests, if you are lack of content in certain areas, if you do not understand conceptually certain areas, right, so we'll have a lot of interaction, we'll have Google Meets, we'll have Zoom interactions, we will have one-to-one interactions, right. Obviously there are people who require content, there are people who require conceptual clarity, and there are people who do not require either of these, but they definitely require a maneuvering, a direction, right, how to use both of them. So obviously there are different types of students or aspirants writing the mains, and they probably require different types of support system, right. So we'll try to cater to that, right. Anyways, then as far as content is concerned, like we have already, the class would be enough for you, but crisp, or you can say short and brief template based content will be given to you. We'll try to value add from various references like IAPA or second ARC already that we have done, then your EPW, NCRB, right? Lot of websites are there, open government data is there, economic survey is there. So lot of inputs can be used from them. I'm not saying they are directly important for you in the exam, no, they are not, but certain good value addition aspects we can use from them. So all that we'll do, right, we'll obviously give you these value addition content which you can utilize for your answers, right. Answer writing or test series is not just about good question, or it is not just about writing and practicing it, but there are two very important aspects of test series. One is evaluation, which is very important. Who evaluates you, how you are evaluated, to what extent this evaluation is quite, you can say, close to the parameters of UPSC, very important, right. Secondly, to what extent the question papers are diversified, right. You cannot simply just practice the previous year question, it may not come. Themes are important, right, but with themes also are necessary, that how this question or that particular theme has been molded to suit the contemporary requirements, right. So how, to what extent the test series forces you to think and come out with your best creative or innovative solutions, that is the most important aspect of a question mains test series, right? So you cannot simply just think of practicing, right? Practicing in the right direction and then somewhere improving that practice is also equally relevant. So thank you so much for your time. See you then, and whenever, like I said, you have any doubts related to them, you can definitely reach out to us in whatever mode you want. Fine. See you then. Thank you so much for your time. All the best.